Hello, everyone. Welcome to the KONTAINEROZ podcast, episode 3. Today, I have my first guest on the show. His name is Mark Greydanus. Hello, Mark.
Hi, Louis. How you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
So, share a little bit about yourself with the audience. What do you do? What are you up to these days?
Well, these days I'm working with my wife on her business. She's in real estate in Beverly Hills, and I've been helping her with some of the houses she has in the market. Um, Most recently, I was working with some moving and storage people, uh, moving people out of the state and to other countries, just helping with the process, helping them get through the process.
So, you help people move?
Well, I don't have I'm not in moving and storage as far as I don't have the authority for moving and storage. I just have the consulting type thing where I help people get through it's a very complicated system to move, and there's a lot of moving parts, and that's pretty much what I've done all my life is connect the moving parts, get people to understand what's going on around them, understand their costs, understand their processes.
Okay. So, you're like broker.
Brokerage is I've been in most of my life, but I'm not at this point. I have closed down my MC number. I'm not operating as a broker right now.
Well, that's where you're at now. But do you mind if we go back a little bit in time?
I don't have a problem with that. No, no.
How was
I'll see how my memory is. We'll
yeah,
kind of
we're gonna test it out right now.
right.
So like growing up, do you have any childhood memories? What was that like? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in West Michigan, small resort town called Saugatuck, and was born in a town near there, Grand Rapids, Michigan, and that's where I had a wonderful growing up in a farm in the country. Um, 6 brothers, 1 sister, and it was real nice. It's a good upbringing.
How did you end up in California anyways?
I fell in love.
Yeah. Okay. With the state or someone that made
No,
you
no,
relocate?
no, not the state. I'm still working on that. The I used to drive over the road, and I used to come to California every week for years. But the main reason I moved out here was because of a beautiful, beautiful woman.
Mm. Is that what you tell all of them?
No, just the one.
Uh there's there's songs in Spanish about trucking that really piss off the ladies.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah. So as far as the childhood goes, the audience, I would like to ask or apologize in advance. This is my first time interviewing someone on a podcast, so I might be all over the place. I'm trying not to, but we're gonna go back to the childhood stuff. Do you have like a favorite memory from your childhood? Something playing back over and over?
A favorite memory would be when they built the interstate past our house. They built Interstate 196 past our house in Saugatuck.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that was when life started happening. I was in my 9, 10 years old, and I would spend the whole day watching the heavy equipment work. And once the freeway was built, I would spend hours sitting and watching and waiting for tractor trailers to go by because that was my passion.
That's when you knew.
Yes, but it'd be a lot easier to do now because they go by every 12 seconds now. Back then, I had to wait sometimes for 2 hours before one went by. So,
Wow.
but it was always just the most beautiful thing in the world when they went roaring by.
And now that same exact freeway, it's really congested, you would say?
Yes, yes.
That explains why on your logo with the 444, you like the cab overs.
Yes, at the cab overs, I first started driving in '78, and those were the cab overs. My first truck was a 1979, actually, international cab over with a 290 Cummins and a 10-speed. That was how it all started.
How did you end up there? Like the process, like me, it was tagging along with my dad, and most of us, like the stories are similar. Someone in the family got us involved. Like You was it literally watching the freeway get built?
That and just all my life, I wanted to drive a truck. I thought it was just a wonderful, wonderful adventure. We had a very small truck stop near our house where like 4 or 5 owner operators parked, and I would go down there on weekends when they were home, and I'd talk to them, and they were always very nice to me, tell me things about the trucks. That was my weekends to sit there and watch them come in, and then owner operators drive all week, and then they work on their trucks all weekend. So it was like a captive audience.
They already had CBs by this point.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. CBs was that's what makes the world go round back in those days.
Back then they used them for what they should have, right?
Oh yes.
Did you have any interesting stories from trucking, from your years in trucking? Anything out of the ordinary or
So how long is this podcast? Are we going to be on this for like 4 days? Because I'm going to have to. If I start stories about driving, it'll
take
take
a
a
while?
while. Yeah. No, I had many wonderful adventures. I had many boring times on highways. It was anybody who's driven over the road for any length of time. It's it's a lifestyle. It's a it was a dream of mine, and it took me a while to get involved in it. I was actually 21 or so when I started. Um, I had been involved in other stuff when I graduated from high school. I did some worked for some nurseries,
Hmm.
drove some farm equipment and that sort of thing, and I worked hauled a dump truck, did some dump truck work. Tried to go to college a couple times, but just didn't interest me. I think 1978, July of 78, I was in a rather large explosion, propane explosion, and got burned and pronounced dead and all that stuff. So that kind of made me realize there was an urgency to follow my dreams.
what were you doing in that forklift? Were you fucking around or what?
It wasn't a forklift, but it was a van, a truck. We had a carpet cleaning business, and we had a 100-pound propane tank mounted with a bungee cord to the back of the driver's seat. Now, this was before all those protections they've come up with. But anyway, the valve was leaking on the top of the tank, and it exploded.
How did it go off? I mean, were you like literally in the van or you were outside? You were smoking?
I was driving the van down an alley, and I lit a cigarette.
Oh,
But
that'll do it.
what saved my life, okay, was I rolled my window down first, and then this was before everybody had lighters. I had matches, and I had the cigarette in my mouth, but I struck the match while holding the steering wheel. So the match was about foot and a half away from my face. It kept me from inhaling the gas and blowing up from the inside out. But it did take most of my skin off from the waist up. It was pretty serious. But,
You said you died a little bit, a little while.
well,
What?
they got me in an ambulance, and they were taking me south on the interstate there out of Grand Rapids to be picked up by a helicopter to be taken to a burn center. And they were discussing me. I was awake yet. I could hear people talking, and they were discussing my ability to survive. And the ambulance driver and the guy in the back and the police officer were saying he's not going to make it. So there's no reason to put him in a helicopter. Would have been nice to have a helicopter ride. They said it was probably not a good idea, or probably a waste of time to put me in a helicopter, so they'd just take me to the burn center in Grand Rapids. So they turned the ambulance around, took me there, but once I got into emergency there, I did die. But they were able to bring me back.
There's people that similar things have happened, right? And they have these stories like the out of body experience and whatnot. You don't recall anything like that, or did you have any type of like spiritual experience or Something out of the ordinary, that you could share, or
No, there was a lot of pain involved with my injuries, and I think what happened when I died is there was no pain. I didn't feel the pain. It was like it was gone. Not, I didn't consciously know that I did not have any pain anymore, but it was like a wonderful thing. I didn't see it as a negative thing.
like eternal rest?
Eternal rest, yes. I think the good Lord said we gotta stop him a minute because this pain's gonna kill him. So we're just gonna stop everything for a minute, and then we're gonna bring him back.
Quick little reset.
So a couple times in the hospital that first day, but then I woke up one time and the priest was reading me last rites. I didn't know what last rites was because I was not a Catholic, but once my family showed up at the hospital, they informed the hospital that I was Christian Reformed. So then they got a preacher in there to stand by me for when I went the next time.
So they made a religious decision for you just because you're about to croak, huh?
Well, the priest was the only guy there, so it was, I guess, the last rites. And I've never really looked into that, but I guess it's in the Catholic faith, the last rites are kind of important if you can get somebody to administer them to you.
So does that mean that if you sinned ever since, now you're fucked because you use it up once and then you don't have access no more?
No, that's probably true. I'm not never thought about it that way. Thank you for
Sorry.
bringing that,
So-
bringing up that point there, Louis.
Since they, okay, so religion came into the topic. So do you have a religious preference, or are you what they assigned you? You adopted that, or?
No, I was born and raised in the Christian Reformed faith. My parents are Christian Reformed, and I was baptized to Christian Reformed. I spent some time in South America working with the missionaries. They were a whole group of Baptist and Catholic and just good people working down there. But I believe in God, and God has shown himself to me many times throughout my life and helped me out of certain situations and just been there to bless me in other situations.
Yeah, sometimes the signs just come into your life at the moment that you need them the most.
That's correct.
So back to the brokered and the trucking stuff. What do you like better? Do you see pros and cons?
I see pros and cons in both of them. I do enjoy just driving, not just driving, but I enjoy being in a truck, just me and the truck and decisions I have to make every single second, and always keeping an eye on things, always being in control, always being able to react and to be able to see what the truck is doing, understanding your truck, your equipment. Brokerage is dealing with a whole lot of different people in the course of the day. There's shippers, your carriers, your receivers, different drivers, hundreds of different drivers. You have to deal with a lot of different personalities, so it's a little bit more intense as far as making your money.
You think a lot of people waste your time in brokerage related business?
Waste my time?
Yeah.
No, I think it's important to really understand where you can help, where you can be a part of it, where you can understand your freight, understand your drivers, try to bring all the pieces together, kind of like what I'm doing now, is all the different scenarios, all the different things that can come up. Brokerage is a pretty intense way to make a living. A lot of money involved.
And the trucking prepared you for that, right? That's what gave you a competitive edge, that you knew both sides. You knew how truckers thought, so that allowed you to provide better service as a broker.
Well, I drove trucks coast to coast for about 12 years before I got into brokerage. And I think it gave me an edge in brokerage, but I know some really, really excellent brokers in the brokerage business that never drove a truck and refused to sit in one. I mean, they're just really good at what they do because you have to have a sense for customer service and taking care of all the different aspects of the business. And in my business, it did help me as being a driver, but I don't think it's necessary. You just have to have common sense and customer service
Uh-oh.
and cash.
Okay. Cash, because people want to get paid. They don't want to have to be chasing you down.
Yes, there's a if you think about what a broker does, a broker finds the freight, a broker finds the carrier. Um, the shipper has money invested in the shipment. The carrier has money invested in his equipment and paying for his driver and fuel. Everybody's spending money, and it's extremely important to pay the carrier and extremely important to get paid by the shipper in brokerage. I mean, it's a constant exchange.
So, like, how many years did you do the brokering for? You said you went trucking like 12 years, right? And
Yes.
then you did
Yeah.
the brokerage. Like, why did you make the switch? Did you have the girlfriend at the time or wife at the time nagging? You're never home. You're always gone. So but what made you make that switch?
Yes,
It's a
you're
big
right.
change.
There was a woman involved. Um,
How did you meet?
it's a funny story. Well, I had known her from growing up. Uh, we had not been in touch for 5, 6 years. I just knew of her. We didn't know each other. We never dated or anything. But she was a waitress in a bar,
Okay.
and I used to go to bars, believe it or not, and I would go and have a couple drinks when I got in off the road. And back then, my line was to pick up girls was, "Hey, baby, want to go to California? Hey, baby, want to go to California? Hey, baby, want to go to California?" And after saying that to her about 2, 3 months, one Sunday night she said, "Yes, I do. When are you leaving?" And I said, "I leave in the morning." And she said, "Where do I have to be?" And I said, "Well, the truck's parked up by 196. What time you leaving?" I said, 8 o'clock in the morning. I'll be there. Now I had to go through with this. So she came out to the truck and we took off and drove to California. Unloaded, reloaded, drove back. It was back when we were doing, as a single driver, I would do 6-day turns to the West Coast out of Michigan. That's not really allowed anymore.
Mm.
This was back in paper logs, and also we didn't normally fill our logs out till we got back from the trip anyway, to make it all fit together. After we made a couple trips like that, then she went on to get her learner's permit, and within 3 months, she was on the truck full time.
So you did it by the book or what? You didn't let her hop on every now and then without the permit?
Yes, and we had left Michigan, and I had driven to Omaha, Nebraska, and I parked in the rest area, and I got her in the driver's seat, and I said, "I just need you to go through the gears. You've been watching me. Just go through the gears." And she missed fourth gear, and I made her stop the truck on the on-ramp there and said, "Start again." She went through the gears again, and she missed another one. I made her stop. Now we're on the shoulder of the highway. I said, "Okay, you got one more. We're on the highway now, so now you have to do it." She went through the gears, got up to the top. Now we had a 13 speed, and it was kind of a fast truck, and I told her that it was a 11 speed. Now she didn't know any better, and she got up to the top gear, and then away we went. And she was going about 65, and I was exhausted, so I just laid down. This is a cab over. I laid down in the bunk just to rest, and I woke up just outside of
Heaven's Gates?
Heaven's Gates. Yeah, just people are familiar with Interstate 80. If you go through the split by 80 and 76, and you start going up Interstate 80 towards Cheyenne. It's kind of a windy section in the wintertime, and there was construction, and she was going way too fast. Obviously, she found the top gear. She was in a construction zone, and she was hollering because it suddenly got rather icy, and she wanted me to fix that situation. And it was pretty scary to begin with, but we were able to get her slowed down and get her off an exit so we could switch drivers. But from then on, she would drive during the day, and I would drive all night.
Nice.
Worked out nice.
So she woke you up as she was feeling like she might lose control, or she woke you up just because she didn't feel comfortable in that scenario? And like, take over the wheel, I'm done with this. And you were surprised that she kept it going. She did a good job then, right?
She got that far, and
How many miles is that? Like,
it's about 350, 400 miles.
Damn, what a fucking icebreaker that was.
Well, she had gotten on the CB radio, and of course, back then too, in the early 80s, people loved to talk to women on the CB radio. All the guys were real helpful. They told her, what gear are you in? Because they were all passing her. And she was going, well, I'm not sure what gear I'm in. So they helped her get it up to 13, and she was able to run with people, and she was having a wonderful time. But the ice, she had gotten into the construction zone and tried to brake, and everything just came loose like it does. And it's scary when the first time that happens. So that's why she started screaming for me to wake up. So
not bad. And she didn't jackknife. Have you ever jackknifed?
I've never jackknifed. I've been spun around completely in the highway. So
how did that happen?
That was on Elk Mountain in Interstate 80, going westbound. There were about 4 inches, 3-4 inches of ice on the road, snowing, zero visibility, 80-mile-an-hour winds. There were gusts. We were driving probably maybe 30 miles an hour, and one hit us. It spun us completely around. The landing gear never hit the tanks. We were facing eastbound and a westbound lane in a blinding snowstorm.
Oh, no.
And we had to drive on the shoulder of the road with our four-ways on, screaming on the CB radio, all the way back down. I can't remember the name of the exit, but there's a little tiny Husky truck stop that was there then. We had to drive up like 20 miles back to that off-ramp to get turned around.
Wow. It's safe to say she passed the driving test, right?
Yes, pretty much. From the time I put her in the driver's seat the first time, she learned on her own. And she learned by talking to other drivers, talking to people. She learned how to back up. Truckers are always really helpful when there's a really good-looking woman trying to back into a dock. They're not so helpful if you're not. But we would have sometimes 4 or 5 guys helping her back into the dock. It was hilarious to watch sometime because they would really come out of the woodwork when she got out of the truck and walked around and did her check when she started backing up. You're supposed to get out and go look, right? She'd be in the little short shorts, and she'd get out there and look around the truck, and she'd get back in the driver's seat, and truck drivers would come out of their trucks to help. She learned it well.
How many years did you guys drive together?
We drove for a year before we got married, and then we drove for 4 years after that. We did intense kind of team driving, high miles, different kind of life than just truck driving, but extreme miles.
So that's a good relationship. You see yourselves, you see each other all day, right?
No. You very rarely see each other. You very rarely have a conversation. You spend 10, 15 minutes at changeover. One's fueling the truck, the other one's taking a shower. You come back out, you get in the bunk, the other driver takes off. You don't really spend a lot of time discussing life and love and future and that sort of thing. It's a very intense. Talk to any team drivers that really run the miles. You got to take a day off to get to know each other again.
So why did you guys stop going over the road? What led to that change?
Her desire to go back to college full time, and my desire to try to get a more regular life.
Your desire? You wanted to stop going over the road as well?
Not actually. I was actually by the wife and by the families, my family, their family, about perhaps I needed to take a more serious approach to life and get a regular job. They used to call it a real job. They said, Mark, when are you going to get a real job? And I'd say, I have a real job. No, when are you going to stop all this truck driving stuff and get a real job? And I kind of got sucked into that. And, if you look back and say, hey, could I do something over? I probably would have said, I love my real job and I have to leave. And I'd still be trucking.
Like, you met me as a trucker and I'm going to stay a trucker, right?
That's right.
So you're back and you're working local. What does your life look like at that point when you stay local? Do you still truck?
Yes, I was still driving a truck, but it was in Michigan they have the multi-axle sand trucks and like 10, 11, 12, 15 axles, whatever. I was driving a scrap truck. It's called a local job, but I would leave before dawn and come back 10, 11 o'clock at night, eat, sleep, shower, and leave again. So I actually was seeing less of her than when I drove over the road and came home for 3-4 days at a time. So the local driving really didn't work out for me or for her, and it kind of ended at that point. So the divorce.
So divorce came into the picture and brokering came into the picture. Or not that quickly?
Not that quick. I went to work for a large tree farm in Michigan, and I was an equipment operator, which I really enjoyed, running large tractors and farming and that sort of thing. A lot of outdoor work, which I do enjoy. And in the fall, it came time for the shipping season where they ship their trees all over the country. And I'm not sure I can say this, but the vast majority of the workers at the tree farm were Hispanics, Mexicans. And I'm a tall white guy, so the owner of the tree company made me the manager
Okay.
of all shipping and receiving there at the facility. That's where I got involved in finding trucks to haul stuff. At this facility, there were guys who had been working there for families. Husbands, wives, kids had been working there for 30, 40 years who knew that business inside and out. I was an over-the-road trucker with no background. I didn't know a spruce from a pine. I didn't know a weed from a redwood. Couldn't tell the trees apart. And I was made the boss of about 100 people. And I was instructed to make it happen. And I couldn't speak Spanish. And it was quite extremely good people that really stepped up and really helped me do my job, and they kept doing their job, and it was a very good experience. But I got involved in having to find tractor trailers to ship the trees to all these different places. And my background in trucking helped with that. And as far as putting rates together, what kind of rates you'd pay somebody to haul a load, that sort of thing, negotiation. I found it kind of exciting.
So how long were you there? And then, So that's what triggered the whole getting into brokering, being there. Then you did your own thing, or
Yes, no, I went through that whole shipping season, the winter there at the tree farm, and in the spring I did get a job with a regular trucking company in West Michigan as a dispatcher and broker, and I had a guy there that owned the company that helped me get my feet wet in the brokerage business.
and that's when 444 came into the picture.
No, 444 has been in my life since forever. As far as the term 444, um, been a part of my life for a long time. Some of the older truckers might remember 1985 when the 444 Cummins came out. There's a few light bulbs going on out there.
I bet.
But I'm not even sure that motor's still around. But I had one in a 85 Kenworth Anteater when the Anteaters first came out. And it was a good motor and good truck. But anyway, that's last time I can remember the 444, but it's been around a long time in my life. I started working at brokerages in Michigan. The first company I worked at for about a year and a half. Then the owner threw a DOT officer out the front door of the building one day, and that job kind of came to an end. I had to find something quickly, and that's a whole story too. But anyway, he didn't like Department of Transportation telling him how to run his business. So, but I can tell you that if anybody's in trucking, you really have to avoid throwing anyone, but especially state employees, out the front door. That's
Wow.
just a recommendation. But from there, I went to another trucking company. Again, these are trucking companies that have their own trucks, their own drivers, their own facilities, their own warehouse, and then they have excess freight that needs to be brokered to outside carriers. So working both as a dispatcher for the trucks that the company had and brokering all the outside freight, the freight that they couldn't haul.
So those that are interested in getting into brokering, can you provide a basic breakdown of how it works? Simplify it if you can.
Brokering is putting the puzzle together. We have a shipper who is shipping his goods or receiving goods from somewhere else, have to find a truck to move it, the right kind of truck, whether it's a van, a reefer, flatbed, kind of stoga, whatever. And you have to find a medium ground where the trucker will do the work or the trucking company will do the work and do the work well. And you have to come up with a price to pay them, and you have to come up with a price from the shipper, and then you have your percentage left over. I've seen a lot in the news lately about how brokers are bad people and are taking advantage of the carriers and the owner operators. And business, it's a business. The broker's in the business to make money. Carriers in the business to make money. The shippers in the business to make money. And you can make a big killing sometime percentage-wise on one load, but there's no longevity in it. The good brokers find good carriers, and they give good prices to their shippers, and it's a long-term relationship is what you're looking for. Just like in life, you're looking for a long-term relationship with your customers, your clients, your carriers, your neighbors, etc.
What advice would you give for a starter in this that's new to it?
Education. Educate yourself on every aspect of trucking. Because as a broker, you don't need to just know about truck driving. You don't need to just know about finding the right truck or finding a customer, etc. You've got to know how the system works. Earlier this year, I had tried to get involved in the port work, my friend Lewis, and that's a system where I have no background or education in. And it's always been intriguing to me, but the port system is one extremely difficult nut to crack. Now, as far as shipments, I have a shipment right now that was brought to the port 3 weeks ago, a 20-foot container going to Hawaii. And that first they told us it shipped, and then Wednesday before Thanksgiving they said, oh, by the way, your container's still here in Long Beach. It's not going to ship until the 30th. So, and the person in Hawaii is going, what? Where's my stuff? And I'm going, well, I don't know, but it's not on the ship. They had told us for a week to 10 days that it was on the ship, en route, going to be there. And then it was almost like somebody got to work one day and said, what the hell is this container still doing here? What's in there? Oh, that's Mark's shipment. It's just a real hard nut to crack, because you lose, as a broker, once it goes into the port or once it goes on it, you lose control of it, because there's so many other pieces involved in controlling those containers. And I admire the people that are involved in it. I admire the back office staff people that work in it every day. I've met some of them. I've talked to some of them. And it's an extreme different world than I was ever involved in.
Yeah, it's a huge puzzle. A lot of things come into the mix. A whole lot of shit can go wrong. And a lot of it tends to happen when they're in that territory called the ports.
Yes. Well, I'm sure that somebody knows what's going on, but it's a matter of there's so many people involved in making one can move that it's probably difficult to keep an eye on all of them. But as far as somebody getting into brokerage, I would say definitely you have to know about trucks. You have to know about the new laws, the California laws, the national laws, the Canadian laws, Mexican laws. You got to know what's going on. You can't just rely on other people to help you in that aspect. You have to educate yourself as much as you possibly can before you pick up the phone to move that first load.
Otherwise, the lack of the knowledge can result in loss of profits, right?
Yeah, loss of profits is the least of your worries. Sometimes you don't profit. Sometimes there's no profit loss. You take out of your own pocket to move something because you missed something. You got to know something about what you're moving. I've talked to some brokers on the phone who I ask for specific information. I'm trying to find a load for a truck. I ask for specific information about what you're shipping, and they don't know. All they know is it weighs 38,000 pounds, and it picks up on Tuesday and delivers Friday. You got to know what you're getting involved in.
So brokers talk to other brokers? You guys network?
Well, when I worked for a carrier, and they have their own trucks, and then I was brokering too, then I would call on behalf of the carrier I was working for. Or I'm trying to reroute the truck. Say I send somebody out of California to Texas. He's sitting in Dallas and he can't find anything. I'll talk to other brokers to see if I can find him something, and then turn him over to the truck, because I'm trying to bring that truck back to California, or I'm trying to place that truck somewhere else in the country so I can utilize it.
Is there any fear that when you connect your carrier with that other broker for the sake of keeping him rolling, that you could lose that carrier?
If you take good care of your carriers, they won't go anywhere else. If you're treating them in such a way that they're always looking for something better, you're going to lose them, whether you expose them to another broker or they find another broker on their own. You've got to find owner-operators and small carriers, and you got to take care of them.
You mentioned systems. So by that, what do you mean? Are you talking about the way they get paid, checking their credit, all that stuff, or should they check your numbers? Because brokers have MC numbers, right?
Yes, they have MC numbers and DOT numbers. Yeah, somebody should, if you're going to deal with me for the first time or any broker for the very first time, um, you should definitely do your due diligence and as a carrier and find out who they are, what their financial background is, that sort of thing. It's a big thing nowadays because it's for it. It used to be for to be a broker. It used to be a $10,000 bond. Now it's a $75,000 bond to get your MC number for a broker. But back when I first started being a broker and started my own brokerage company, you had to have $10,000 to start. You had to have physically have $10,000. Now you need a $75,000 bond. However, all these insurance companies around the country will sell you a $75,000 bond for a yearly rate of anywhere from $1,500 to 25 or whatever your credit rating is. So it it used to take a little bit more money to get involved into brokerage in the 80s, 90s, and I believe the checks and balances they had back then were a little more stringent. Nowadays, with all the online stuff, and there's people starting up brokerages, right? They'll start up three or four of them and then run one for a while and close it and start another one, activate the other one and run it because there's very little upfront money to get yourself in the door. But it's like anything, any business. I mean, if you don't know anything about selling coffee, if you go out and buy a coffee store and you don't know where to get coffee and you don't know where to get cups and you don't know where to get customers to come in the door, you're not going to survive.
So at what point would I be a real broker? Like, just because someone says, hey, help me out with this load, find me a truck, and I post it and I throw it out there, I'm kind of doing a similar job, right? By connecting that truck with that company, but I'm double brokering, right? Or is that guy double brokering and I'm just adding to the excessive brokering?
I've seen a load. I saw a load one time, and this was in the '90s, where a load had been brokered 9 times before it got to a truck. And that's a real extreme. And it started out as a really good paying load, and the truck that actually pulled it was not even qualified or permitted to haul that load. Anyway,
Wow.
um,
9 times.
yes,
I thought three was bad.
and everybody took a piece of it,
Yes.
a large piece of it. So, I think what has to happen if you considered yourself a broker, and a customer gives you a load, anyone gives you a load, and you have to post it on a load board to get a truck, then you're not a broker.
So a broker should have already his carrier list established.
Yes,
He should have his own little network to resort to, not go out and advertise.
yes.
Okay.
I believe that you should have carriers that know you and will run for you, owner operators that know you pay well. In the brokerage company that I started in Michigan in early 2000, I knew the drivers. I would have dinner with them. I knew who they were. Um, I wouldn't call them friends because we didn't really socialize, but we trusted each other. When I said I have a load that picks up in Detroit, Michigan, going to Dallas, Texas, has to pick up on this date, deliver at this date, at this time, I didn't have to discuss the rate with my carriers because they knew. I knew what their threshold was, what they needed to make, and they knew that I wasn't going to stick it to them. I wouldn't send them on a load that didn't pay. The importance of the relationship with the carrier and the relationship with the shipper is so important. I think it's almost more important when you start out to have a carrier following or find carriers. Now, it's hard to discuss setting up a carrier with you when you have no freight, but you have to know what you're going to get involved in, whether you're going to get involved in frozen food or produce or special commodities, electronics, whatever. I think you have to choose a specific area that you have knowledge in and then find carriers that will service that sort of customer and talk to them and find out what they can do and what they will do and what they're capable of doing. Do they have teams? Do they have singles? Do they have newer trucks, older trucks? What are they doing? Make sure they're a real carrier. There's a lot of people operating just like brokers operate out of their house. There's a lot of carriers operate. They don't have a yard. They don't have a maintenance facility. They don't have any backup, and that's fine as long as they're doing a good job at what they do. But you have to weed people out to make sure that when you do send them into a customer that you find and attain, that they're going to take 100% care of that.
What would you say is like average or industry standard percentage that brokers keep, or of the so-called spread? Is that a number you just come up individually, or is it something known amongst each other? Like, this is what we aim for, or it's very individual. Like, if you want to be the broker that makes no profit, then that's your problem. Or if you want to be the guy that goes TQL style and just gets the most, screw the carrier. Is there a magic number for you?
Well, there's not a magic number. There was a company that I worked for in Michigan that if if I could not get the company, the brokerage company, if I could not get them 23%, I was told not to move the load. But there's different people that have different expenses involved. I think the standard in the industry that people always talk about is 10%. The broker takes 10% and the carrier gets 90%. There's so many variables. There's fuel surcharge now is a huge thing. If you're billing it to the client or to the customer, that full fuel surcharge should be passed on to the carrier because the carrier buys the fuel. And there are a lot of brokers that will take a huge percentage of the fuel surcharge money and keep it rather than pass it on to the carrier. Everyone does it different. I've seen some horrendously high percentages kept by some brokerage companies over the years. When I was in operation in my own brokerage, I had owner-operators and carriers and that sort of thing that I called the 10 percenters. It didn't matter what we found, what we came across, what I was able to secure from the shipper, they always got 90%. But they always gave me 120% service. These guys, it's amazing the quality of mainly owner-operators, but also small carriers and even some carriers of 100, 200 trucks that are really diligent about service. And that's the key. I mean, if you can pick up the phone at 6 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night and secure a truck for a client that's in trouble, a shipper that's in trouble, it's because you have a relationship with the carrier and you have a relationship with the client. You're going to make things happen. I have had some loads that I've taken more than 10%, more than 20%. Sometimes I would keep a higher percentage than that, only because the load had so many variables in it, meaning if you get stuck somewhere and you have to pay the driver either a weather-related issue or a breakdown issue or sitting at a shipper's, delayed type of thing, you have the money to pay them. Sometimes at the end of the trip, when the load was secured, I would send them a statement stating that now the load, instead of paying you $2,200, the load now pays you $2,800. And there's something about carriers, they're always happy to hear that they made actually more money.
In that scenario, that could have been in your pocket instead. You didn't have to disclose that, or
No, I would not have to. If they agreed to do it for 2,200 and
Mhm.
they did it and they got it done, and I could have kept $1,000 off the load. Um,
Oh,
I
okay.
just sometimes the relationship you have with the carrier and the relationship you have with the shipper. You can also go back to the shipper and say, "Listen, I thought we would need like 4 grand to move this load, but I actually found a guy that wants to go there and he wants 1,800. So give me 2,500 and we'll make it go for you." That establishes a relationship with the carrier and a relationship with the shipper. He's going to be more likely to pick up the phone to call you the next time. If you stick it to the shipper over and over again, they'll find somebody else. They'll find a better broker. They'll find a better carrier. And the carrier, if you take high percentages off a carrier, he's always looking for something better. And when you need him, he's not going to be there. He's going to be hauling something for somebody better. So,
Always loyal to whoever's paying more that day, because they're
yeah,
already used to going day by day. They don't see the longevity because you're always screwing them. So when they see that opportunity, they go for it, and you're no longer a priority.
exactly. And I had drivers, I had owner operators in Michigan who they would call me on Wednesday and say, "What do you have for me?" And I'd say, "Nothing, but don't do anything. Stay home." And they go, "Okay." And they'd stay home. They'd call me Thursday and they'd say, "Do you have anything?" I'd say, "No, but don't go anywhere. Stay home." Right?
Yeah, we,
And then Friday night at 8 o'clock, I'd call them and say, "Are you still home?" And they'd say, "Yes, sir." I'd say, "Okay, this is what you're going to do."
they knew
And
you were gonna come through. You were
I
gonna come
was
through eventually.
I would come through for them, and it would make it worth their while. It might not pay them for those 2 days, but if they would have taken off and done some other load for less money, and they'd be in the wrong spot, or I could send them on a rounder and they'd be coming back. It worked out for them over and over and over again. So you ended up with a relationship with these guys. They knew you were going to take care of them.
Yeah, it's happened to me where I don't want to be just sitting around with containers. So I've missed out on good paying loads because I didn't want to wait. So maybe a yard to yard that pays way less. And then if I would have waited the next day, something would come up that would have paid more than what I made in those 2 days. So it was not worth it. But we don't know the future, so we get that FOMO, the fear of missing out, because we don't have, well, me, I don't have certain relationships. I hop around a lot. See what that guy in your scenario, he already knew that you come through, so he's okay with waiting. Me, I didn't know what I was gonna get tomorrow, so we have this mentality we gotta keep rolling, and a lot of guys roll based on the hook is that they got volume, so they'll do it for less, but for the sake of staying rolling, they feel that if they're rolling, they're rolling. If you ain't turning, you ain't earning. That's the
Exactly. But my theory in brokerage is less miles, more money. That's what I used to tell my owner operators. I don't want you running to the coast and back in 6 days. If you can go to Omaha and back and make the same money, I don't need you gone. I need you here. And it took some time with some of these guys to make them realize that there was more money out there if they work smarter. But there is a whole bunch of really successful smaller trucking companies and up to 100, 150 trucks, guys. I've met some extraordinary men and women in the industry who really know how to make money with trucks, and it's a joy to watch. It's tough sometimes. Drivers equate, whether you're an owner operator or you're a company driver, you equate income with miles. If I get more miles, I'll make more money. That's the way they have us all geared. But I think that if you work a little smarter, you can make better money, especially in the market right now. There's a lot of good money out there, a lot of good rates.
Do the brokers quote the work based on miles, or they just use the knowledge that truckers go based on miles to profit off of that? Are there other things that go into it to where you get your rate?
There's a lot of different variables that go into it. It depends on the volume. I used to do a lot of last minute stuff. I used to have a lot of clients that customers that would call me when they got stuck, or a shipment had to leave and had to be there, had a Sunday, or it had to be a specific date and time, going to a job site or a trade show or that sort of thing, where somebody else might have dropped the ball. Then it's not so much about rate per mile. To me, it's more about, back in the 90s, we had these figures in our mind that a single driver, single truck had to make $500 a day, and a team truck had to make $1,000 a day. So, somebody could say, I need this load to go to Indianapolis. It's only 250 miles, and I'd say $2,000. And I'd say, $2,000, that's outrageous. And I'd say, well, I'm going to put a guy on it, and he's going to go down there, and he's going to deliver, and he's going to have to sit there 3 days and come back. And the miles are low, but he needs to make his money. It's a guaranteed truck. We like to, if you're dealing with company trucks, a small company, and you're trying to move a load, the shortest miles loads are the hardest to move, even when you have carriers working for you, because the drivers get paid by the mile. They don't want to drive 200 miles and deliver. They want to drive 800 miles to deliver. They want to drive 600 miles and deliver. They want to drive, to the coast and back. That's where they make their money. I did have some smaller carriers that would pay their drivers percentage of the load. Once these guys figured out what that meant, there were a lot of guys that would just as soon just drive to Chicago and back, or just drive to Indianapolis and back from Michigan, as opposed to driving all the way to Texas and back. They'd make the same money. I feel that you got to find smart carriers that really believe in customer service, whether it's for a broker or for their direct shippers. They have to believe in customer service to make it work.
I think those are easy to identify most of the time. The appearance of the truck gives them off. If they keep up with the maintenance, sometimes if the truck's falling apart, it resembles that they don't take it serious.
Well, that's debatable.
Mm-hmm.
A mechanically sound truck that looks like it's abandoned on the side of the road, but it's mechanically sound, and the driver believes in what he's doing, and he can make it happen, to me, is better than shined up chrome, light filled W9, and the driver doesn't give a shit whether it gets there or not. It's I've always found that the equipment has to be mechanically sound, has to be taken care of, the tires got to be good, that sort of thing. You got to be able to make the trip. I would deal with some guys in Michigan who were farmers, big farmers, and they always had trucks to haul the crop from the field to the bins and stuff like that. And those trucks would sit like 9 months out of the year, just sit in the field somewhere, and then they'd crank them up again, and away they'd go for their harvest season. I got some of those guys to run for me during the winter, and these old cab-overs looked like they probably wouldn't make it to the next stoplight, but they were mechanically sound, and these guys were farmers or veterans or people that have worked hard all their lives. They know the value of customer service, and it's a wonder to watch.
I guess I was thinking more of like the terminal trucks at the ports, missing fenders, missing headlights, banged up from all the drivers that go through them. But yeah, I get your point. Cosmetics doesn't really mean shit if it's on the side of the road.
Yeah, but I mean, those terminal trucks, there are some pretty rough looking container haulers.
There's a lot of show trucks coming out of the ports nowadays too.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
there is some nice equipment.
If I want to know that you're a good broker, how can I check your history, or if it's worth the risk? How do I know you're gonna pay me? How soon can I demand payment? Is there an industry standard for that? What would you say?
We used to have in the 80s and 90s, we had a industry standard of the broker, we would pay you 30 days after the receipt of your invoice. That was when everything was done through the mail. Nowadays, with the scanning and the ability to get a bill of lading and a delivery receipt sent, like as you sit in the dock getting unloaded, has changed that. 30 days has always kind of been the standard, but more so now, people want to be paid in advance to get started, and then they want money to buy fuel with, and then they want money when they get there, and then right? It's more of a upfront kind of money that the broker has to have in order to make it work. Back in the 90s, it was not unusual to have receivables coming in the the millions, and then you'd have at the end of the month you'd have to pay out 700,000. I mean, you'd have to really. It works a lot quicker now as far as the turn of the money, but you have to find a broker that works for you. You have to find the terms that work for you. It doesn't really matter what the industry says. If you say to the broker, I'll pull this load, but I want 50% up front and 50% when I deliver, it's up to the broker then to say, I don't do that. I pay in 15 days or I pay in 10 days. These are my terms.
So the carriers can speak up and try to negotiate. It's not always what the broker says.
If a carrier does not negotiate with each broker on payment terms, and you got to get it in writing too. You can't just make a deal on the phone with people and expect them to follow through. A lot of the larger brokers have contracts that they send for you to sign, and these contracts, nobody reads them. Everybody just signs them and sends them back, DocuSign or whatever. And if you ever get a payment problem, they say, well, on page 11, item 7, if we say right there that if your truck is red, we're not going to pay you. And you go, I didn't read that.
Oh man.
So I mean, there's always something that they can pull out of this contract. So if you're going to sign up with a broker and you're going to fill out a big contract and you're going to put your MC number in there and you're going to sign it 6 times, read it. Read the whole thing.
Does the shipper pull the same type of thing on brokers? See, because you get the rate confirmation between the broker and the carrier, 2,000, let's say, and now you have an agreement with the shipper for, let's say, 3,000. Just an example. Does the shipper send you a rate con as well? Because earlier you mentioned that there's a rate confirmation between you and the carrier, but then the broker might ask for more money from the shipper. At that point, the shipper won't say, no, we agreed on $3,000, I'm not giving you more. And then there's the brokers that get the extra money and they don't pass it down to the carrier. I guess I made a long question and I hope it doesn't sound complicated, but there's rate confirmations between broker and carrier.
Yes.
The carrier agreed, that's it. You're asked out if I get any more money. So you could ask for more money and you already secured your profit with the carrier. Does the shipper cover their ass so that you don't ask for more?
It's always different, and that's another thing you have to do with your shippers or your clients, people you're hauling for. Sometimes it's a contract You sign a yearly contract. Usually in January, February, those come up. You tell them, this is my rate per mile. This is my fuel surcharge based on national prices. This is my drop charge. This is my delay charge. It's all in there, so that each load, that once it gets to the end, you figure out what your costs are, and they figure out on their end it should be the same figure. I did a lot over my history with spot pricing based on the equipment that was available. And when you do that sort of thing, I would verify the rate with the shipper with an email, send it to him, and he would email me back that it was a good rate. So you have a record. You should never verbally give a rate to a shipper of any kind. You should always get it in writing in some form.
The rate confirmation, to me, if I'm understanding correctly, it's just in writing, like you said. It's not this form that everybody uses. It doesn't have to look a certain way. It just has to be documented in writing, and they confirm. So we negotiated on the phone a certain rate, and then I would ask for your email. I'm going to send you that rate con right now. It goes both ways, right? Either the carrier can send you the rate confirmation, or you could send it, or does it matter who sends it?
The broker generally sends the rate confirmation to the carrier, and unless the carrier wants to get involved, say you got, say as a broker, you're handling all the frozen food out of Joe's frozen food market in Salinas, and you're shipping, I made that name up, you're shipping all their frozen vegetables to all the markets in the country. Now you might, in order to cover that, you might bring carriers on and sign a contract with them, a set contract that you negotiate with the carrier. At that point, you might be able to just, instead of a confirmation, you would just share load numbers. And it's a larger scale there, where you wouldn't have to put out an individual rate confirmation each time, because the carrier already has a contract with the broker to haul that freight at a set amount each time. It's not that you'd have to have a confirmation every time.
Yeah, because with containers, I would haul for many different companies, other carriers. I know it's complicated right now in California because everybody and their mama are getting their own authority. Everybody's a carrier now, right? So
Right.
double brokering is really off the chain right now. Ridiculous. One of the carriers would dispatch through WhatsApp, but they would call you to give you the rate. So I made it a habit to always, in the message, put, per our conversation, I'm doing this load for this much. If it's overweight, I'm going to add this much more. If I get stuck, it's this much. Like, add details. Is that considered would that be a valid form of rate confirmation if they agree to it in writing with a reply through any format, or it has to be email always?
No, it can be any electronic. I think any electronic, as they come out, the new tech and everything else, as long as there's a acknowledgement, like an email or a WhatsApp or something. I send you a message and saying load pays $2,000, and you don't respond, and you don't send me any extras, and I never hear from you again, and you haul the load. But I believe in confirmations, written confirmations that are signed by someone. But that's a problem too, because if you get a larger carrier, you might be talking to a dispatcher, but when the fax or the email comes over, it's Joanne or Jose in the other room, and he just signs it and sends it back. He doesn't read it. He doesn't, right? There's no chain of events. It doesn't always go to the guy you were talking to. That's why I think it's important electronically now to deal directly with someone, an individual who has told you what the rate is, to get back to that person with a confirmation. Not a written confirmation, but get back to them so that you have a chain of evidence, let's say, of what the rate was supposed to be and what the extras are.
Yeah, I wish there was a way for us to know more things that go into it, because we miss out on a lot of pay. Like in the ports, for example, the carriers, the drivers, the owner ops, They don't really know all the extra fees that are added to the moves they do. Maybe the all-in fee, well, not all in, but maybe a round trip can be at the $800 mark, but they're getting 400 or let's say 500 plus wait time. But meanwhile, behind their backs, the carrier is billing the customer port congestion fee, holiday pay. The wait time is like way more, all that stuff, and they don't disclose that with the driver because we need the carrier to give us the work, but they need us to pull it off. So it should be fair that, like what you did, if you got more, you went and disclosed it with the driver and you hooked them up. But a lot of us, we don't know how the extra fees work. So once we agree to 400, that's all we're getting, even if they get more.
Yeah, but that's the relationship between. I mean, you have to. If every time the carrier has to move a container, he has to call like 10 different people, 100 different people just to get somebody to do it for $400, he might have a lot more time involved in it than the extras cover. There might be a lot of variables on it, but um, I think I would love to see a law or a suggestion in industry where the shipper has to put the gross rate on the bill of ladings. That'll never happen because there's way too much money taken off the top of everything, not just by the broker, but by everybody else, even by the shipper themselves. There are transportation people in transportation that get a lot of extras for using a particular carrier. There's people that are in the office that are giving you the loads for $400. They know full well it pays $1,200, but if there's trucks out there that'll do it for $400, they're not going to volunteer to you that it pays $1,200. I mean, everybody's out there to make a living and to make as much money as they possibly can.
So when we take the cheap rate, when we move stuff for cheap, we condition you to kind of know what you're working with, so you don't voluntarily give us more. You
Never.
already know we work for cheap.
Exactly.
We do it to ourselves.
Yes. Yes. And also, I think I don't know about ports. I don't know a lot of port drivers, but I think that if you truly know what your costs are, like you said earlier, I just want to run miles. I want to run miles. So you'll go grab a container and do a flip on it or whatever you do with it. And in the back of your mind, I'm really not going to make any money doing this, but I'm going to be busy. And I don't want to sit here. I want to flip and make $400. It's going to take me 2 days. But if you really had your money, if you really knew down off the top of your head, you didn't have to sit down and make a lot of figures and figure it out. But if you knew, I need to make this amount of money per day, if all the guys down in the port knew that, in order to make this work, in order for me to pay my truck payment and pay my fuel payment and pay my wife and pay my rent and pay everything else that's going on in my life and pay for my car payment and all this other stuff, if you really sat down and figured out what your budget was and what you needed to make in order to make it work for you, for where you make a profit, right? Then when the guy calls you the $400 load, you'd say,
Fuck off.
I'm better off sitting right here,
Yeah.
because then my costs are down. I don't have to buy fuel. I don't have to, but you can't sit all week. So people get to the point where I got to make something. I got to make something. I got to make something.
We think we're making something, but if we know what our cost, we'll be glad we stayed home.
Yes, but it's not, as a broker, it's not my job to make sure that you know what your costs are. I know what my costs are, and I know how much money I need to make. And if I have $1,000 day or a $10,000 day or a $50,000 day.
$100 a day.
$100 day? No.
No.
I'll just hang up the phone. I'm not going to talk to you. But we have to. We're all in it for a living. But I mean, there's if you're worried about the fraud or the dishonesty amongst brokers to truckers or all this other stuff, there's not a business out there that doesn't have it. That doesn't make it right. But
It helps knowing your shit, and now it's not up to you to change them, the predatory ones. Now you, as long as you know your shit, you'll cover your ass, and you'll be good. It doesn't matter if it's an ethical broker or not, because you got your knowledge to protect yourself with.
exactly. And knowledge and educate yourself on the system and the rates. And even when you have a load, you're under a load, you have a load booked and you're doing a load. Instead of just sitting in your truck where you're sitting waiting for something to happen, call around, talk to all the other brokers, see what they got, right? What do you got going on? What's happening? How much you paying for this? How much you paying for that? And then you'll find out that there's all these different prices out there, and then
Yeah.
you can make a list and you can call the higher brokers next time before you take off.
Yeah, I'm thankful that you brought up the knowing your cost, because at first you would bring it up a lot. Know your costs. What are your costs? So have you figured out your cost? And I'm working every day. Like, what do you mean? I'm making money every day, but not all money is good money. So knowing my cost, it helped me negotiate rates with confidence, because I know my rate. Even if I get just the cost, since you told me to incorporate my salary into the cost, right?
Yeah.
If I get Even if I get just my operating cost, which my number was like 575 at the time, I knew I was good. So I could ask with confidence. Prior to that, it was more like at the mercy of the other of the whoever's on the other line. Oh, it's 800. Oh, um, is that the best you can do? Yeah, that's the best we can do. All right. Also, once you know your cost, do not tell the broker your cost, because that's not a good idea.
No, no, you don't want to. I don't want to know your costs, but I want to know that you're educated in it, so that because I want a long-term relationship with my carriers. So I don't want some guy who's arguing into the ground, right? I don't want some guy who's going to run out of fuel because he can't buy any, right? I don't want a guy who's running out there with no maintenance because he just can't afford it, right? I want good service. I want customer service. I want 120% service from my carriers. So I want you to know what your costs are. I want you to make a profit. I want you to be here tomorrow because I'm going to need you tomorrow. I want you to be here in 6 months. And maybe if you're making a profit, maybe you'll buy a couple trucks. Maybe you'll have 3 trucks. I see a lot of guys that buy more trucks
To move more cheap freight.
to move more cheap freight because they think then they'll have more money coming in, which they do. They have more money coming in, but they have a whole lot more money going out. And these trucks get flipped. They get sold 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times sometime.
And then they got one breaking down, and then the other ones are just paying for that repair, and it's just a cycle of, it's an illusion. You got
Yes.
the money coming in, it's just the optical illusion. Like, anyone that wants to do a list right now and figure out their operating cost, what would you tell them? Split it in two, right? The variable and the fixed cost.
Yeah, if your fixed costs, you'd want to know what those are as far as what your truck payment is. It's going to be per week or per month. What your insurance costs are. I would even include in your, you can either make it just a business thing with your fixed costs, just your tractor or your tractor trailer, whatever, or you can also include your fixed costs as in your rent and your budget at home. You can include that in it too, because if you're out chasing miles and when you get home you can't afford to pay for anything at home, then you might want to rethink things. But your variable costs are your fuel costs, your salary to yourself. Now, also, I think if you're working in the port, you should include your salary to yourself as a fixed cost, only because you're out there 5, 4, 6 days a week, 7 days a week. You got to pay yourself something.
Yeah, I found it easier to go based on that and not the whole additional bills, like the house bill, the
Right.
rent, all that shit. I went with the salary will cover all the personal expenses. So that was good.
That's good.
So the variables are all the shit that fluctuates, right? So that would be the fuel, the buying tires. What else?
Oh, yeah, all your maintenance, anything that you're going to have to add to your truck, any extras you might run across as far as you might have to weigh your trailer, you might have to, it's road expenses when you're out there and that sort of thing.
Hmm.
That's all going to be variable costs, but you have to put a figure on it. You have to have an idea of exactly how much money you need per day, per week, per month, and then you have to make your decisions based on that when you accept a load from a broker. Now, if you get involved with a carrier that's going to pay you a set amount every day, as an owner operator, he's going to pay you X amount of dollars per day to work for him. I think in a port, I would get some idea of how much he expects for that day rate, right? If he wants you to work day and night to make the day rate, then it's not worth it to you.
Yeah, I went with my cost from the previous year. That really helped me. So I put all my expenses of the oil change, the maintenance, about like 10 grand, assuming there was a major breakdown. Included that in there. The fuel that I spent that year, the road tax, registration, all that shit, the truck parking, truck wash, my phone bill, the insurance, anything related to that. And then all that divided it by the 365 days. And I would work Monday. It's just a scenario, right? If I work Monday to Friday, I still have to add Saturday and Sunday. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I still had to add. So let's say if the your operating costs daily are 500, you would have to add up Saturday and Sunday. That's $1,000. Now you divide 1,000 by 5, right?
Yes.
And add that to the daily cost. That's your real operating cost. I hope I made sense.
That's excellent. And if you are talking to a broker, especially a broker, if you're dealing with just with brokers, and they offer you that $100 load or $200 load, and it's going to take half a day to do it, there are times when you might grab it because there's really nothing else going on. But you got to spend the rest a whole day you're doing that. Every time the truck stops, you got to be on the phone with other brokers. You got to find something that works for you. You got to keep calling. And there are brokers out there who will value you as a truck, that they need the trucks to make it work. And they'll find you and they'll value you and they will use you over and over and over again for better rates than what you're working for. And if everybody in the port did that, a lot of your bad brokers would, or your cheap brokers would go away.
Yeah. Before I forget, also, if you want to know how much it costs to just leave the truck parked, then you would just do the same math scenario, but running only the fixed cost.
Correct.
That's how you know how much it costs you to just park it.
Right.
And then that $100 load, if it costs you, just an example, if it costs you $90 to just leave it parked, are you gonna go take $100 load just to profit $10 and put wear and tear on your equipment?
Yeah.
It kind of makes it easier to decide and know if it's worth it or not.
Well, it's never easy if you've got all these payments coming in and you're not getting offered any work, and a cheap load comes along. There's times when people take a cheap load, but it's just another nail in your future coffin. Just don't, if you can hold out. And also when you're making money, you got to put money aside to pay for those days that you're not working, pay for emergencies that come up. You got to have a savings when you got a truck.
What's a good percentage you think? 10% from the gross, or 10% from the take home, or
As far as what to save,
yeah,
oh,
put the set aside?
that's a huge variables there. But I think you have to look at your yearly expenses, and you got to try to get that. You have to get like 6 months where you could just park the thing for 6 months. I would look at a figure like that to put away, have somewhere savings or something where you're not going to take it out for Christmas presents or a new SUV or something. It's just there for your business when you need it.
Earlier you mentioned the number 10%, the average that brokers keep. I've heard dispatch services that keep 6%. That's a little bit up there, close to 10%, I would say. What's the difference with a dispatch service and a brokerage? Do you know the difference? Can you help us understand that?
Most of your dispatch services are people that get online to be your dispatcher. They don't have MC number. They don't have a bond. If the dispatch service says, I'm not going to pay you, you have no recourse. But if a broker says to you, I'm not going to pay you, you have to apply on the bond. And that's a process, and that's a lengthy process, and not many people, there are people who do it, not many people, but usually if a brokerage goes under, everybody applies against the bond, and that's, the money's gone right away. But there's no checks and balances with a dispatch service. It's just their word, your word. I mean, you can find some good people out there that know, their uncle is a transportation guy at Whole Foods or something, and he can get you freight out of there, right? There are some good dispatch services out there, but you have to be careful because there's no checks and balances as far as if they don't pay you.
Dispatching services, they work on your behalf with brokers, right?
Yeah, if a dispatch service is getting you broker loads, then you have a problem in your business. If you have your own authority and your wife's sister is at home and she wants to make all the phone calls and find you loads and do all the paperwork and everything and just send you the information and you're making money, that's fine. There's no problem with that as a dispatcher. But if you hire a dispatcher service to call other brokers and take their freight and then give it to you and they get 6%, you're putting money in the table that should be in your pocket.
Because now if the broker's at 10%, the dispatch is 6%, that's 16% already you're losing, right, down the line.
Yeah, but most brokers, even the really big brokers, are more like 18%, 18 to 25%. They're not at 10%. That's just a national, that's a figure that I was taught in the 80s. That's produce brokers used to take 8%, and dry freight and general commodities used to take 10%. But that has gone off the rails as far as, the real big brokers, they take far more than that. Most of I think the really big brokers, I don't name any names, but the guys on a phone that you talk to, they get paid on a percentage of what they net for the company. So when you're talking to them on the phone, their intention is to take as much of your money as possible as a carrier into the broker's coffers so that they can make some money. There's no incentive. Now, I've met some pretty good brokers. I had a owner-operator friend of mine who was leased to Landstar that ran for a C.H. Robinson broker in Atlanta. And he made really good money because he was a specialized carrier and he had a relationship with a broker, and it was working out real well for them. But if you can make money I mean, there can be, if there's 9 brokers involved in the load, who cares? As long as you, as the carrier, the owner operator, as long as you're making the money you need to make a profit.
Because you know your cost.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, it doesn't matter how many people are involved in it.
Yeah, I really hope that the podcast long term it brings value to people that want to learn more about trucking. I've been in it for a while and I still feel there's so much to learn. Like I get confused, to be honest. I'll admit it. I get confused. There's like so much going on. And that was kind of a personal question, I guess. Dispatch service, like what's the difference, you know? Should I have a dispatch service get me loads or just find a broker?
Yeah, I think if when I was actively working as a broker, if a dispatch service and they identified themselves as that called me to book a load with me, I would not give it to them through a dispatch service. I want to talk directly to the carrier or the owner operator. I didn't want them, if they wanted to get some money from the carrier or their owner operator another way, that was fine. But I want direct contact with the truck doing the load. You as an owner operator are your own best dispatcher, and you don't have to rely entirely on brokers. You can also go to customers, to clients, to businesses, large and small, and offer them your phone number and your contact information. I would say that if you start, I wouldn't haul a load for a shipper until you actually talk to somebody face to face, introduce yourself, have a conversation with them about what you expect, have a rate sheet that you can hand them, something they'll have in their hands when they call you. But there's nothing wrong with owner operators or small carriers getting involved with shippers.
You give them the rate sheet. Should you include in the bottom like some fine print, rates subject to change? This is just for examples. Because what if a load has more potential and based on your rate sheet, you shoot yourself in the foot?
Well, every load, if you'd have to have your rate sheet based on if you were going to go rate per mile or by hour or by day or whatever. It depends on what the shipper's doing. If it's just a rail thing, and not just a rail thing, but if it's a rail thing or a port thing, everything is different. You understand that market better than I ever will. And you would have your accessional charges on the bottom also, all the different accessional charges that can come up. Because you got to remember, if you're hauling directly for a shipper or a receiver, is that there's not going to be a broker there to absorb costs that arise. So that's the education again. You got to know all the different charges, all the different possibilities, all the different scenarios that could come up.
Okay. Can I be a trucking company and a brokering company at the same time? Can I get like the broker authority added on to what I already have? Is that a thing?
I do. I can't be quoted on this, or I believe that it used to be that you had to have one MC number as a carrier and a different MC number as a broker. I've heard that that has changed some states, but I'm not sure if it's since the MC number is a federal number, I'd assume that you'd have to check with that online. I'd have to check that myself, but there are carriers that have brokerages that don't actually have a broker license or a bond. They just broker stuff out based on their company name. I don't know if it's probably acceptable in the industry, but I'm not sure if it's especially proper in the industry.
Okay. This question is based on payments. Do carriers can get the loads factored, right? But brokers seem to have. I'm assuming brokers need to have the funds available, or do brokers factor stuff too? Is that a dumb question?
It's not a dumb question. I mean, brokers use all different forms of funding, revolving credit lines, bank money they have already, loans, There's some people that use factoring companies quite frequently. Some brokerage companies, but I've never used a factoring company
But you can if you wanted to.
as a broker.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. You can any financial thing you know it's called different names and different sell your receivables. There's banks that will buy your receivables. Um, if you show some kind of history with it, you know you can go in and the bank will fund them for you. Everybody takes a percentage.
Everyone's making money along the way, huh?
Yeah, the rubber on the road is the owner operator or the small carrier or the right. It's actually making it happen. So we all appreciate you. Thank you very much.
We appreciate our brokers. Thank you very much to all these honest brokers.
Yes.
You know, a lot of times when people out here mention they're starting a brokerage, they sound really
Enthusiastic.
and it seems they think that you just call yourself a broker and everything just falls into place. Like it's not that easy. There's also horror stories. There's also unhappy endings. There's also losses. You don't just call yourself a broker and you're balling overnight.
No, I think there's you have to build up to it. It's like I would attribute it to having to go to college 4 years to get a degree. You have to be in the business for a while to become. I mean, you can get a broker's license. You can get a name that says you're a broker. You can get a sign in the door, but you really have to go through the ups and downs and the in and outs and really understand it and get some good carriers following you and some good consistent customers to make it work. It's a tough business. I've seen people come into it, be in it, weeks and they go away, and I've seen people come in it, be in it for 10 years and something happens and they're gone. So I mean it's I've had customers, shippers, had one in Michigan that hadn't given me any freight for like 6 months, and the guy called me up and said, I just got rid of the broker I've been using. I'd like to use you again. And he was giving me like 5-6 loads a week, and they were all going to the West Coast, and they were all paying big bucks. And all of a sudden, he was into me for $300,000 or $400,000, and I didn't get that money for 7 months.
Wow.
The reason they had come over to me is because the other broker cut them off and said, I'm not going to do business with you anymore because you're not paying me. And they were in financial problems, and I never checked anything. I never did my due diligence. I never checked with the old broker. I was just happy to have all this, and I broke a lot of golden rules, and I got in trouble there for a while. So every day you're going out to the proverbial mailbox, opening it up and praying there's a check in there, and it didn't
Back
come.
then it was all checks, huh?
Yeah.
So there's obviously some bad stories out there. Well, what's the hardest thing that you ever had to do in brokering or with a brokerage?
The most difficult thing I've ever had to do is I had a brokerage of my own in Michigan that I had to shut down. Had a wife, lovely lady from Quebec, who chose to go home and empty the funds out of the bank account. It's kind of I went from Sunday being well respected with carriers and money, etc. And by Wednesday, everything was gone, and I had to try to fix things and try to shut things down without hurting anybody. And it took me about 3 months to make sure everybody got paid. Some of the carriers not only, of course, came after me, but they also went after the bond, and they also went after the shippers and the receivers and billed everybody. And some of them got paid by 3 or 4 different sources for the same load and kept the money to because when somebody's going down, instead of offering a helping hand, they saw an opportunity to make bigger bucks. But I went from thinking I had all these people that really cared for me and were part of our team and working together and everything else till it just took a matter of days, and it was because money's involved. It changed. I believe that there were maybe four guys. All of them were owner operators of their own authority that had worked for me for a lot of years. Um, good good people stood by me the whole way, so it was great.
So when this was going on, there was people that you or the brokerage still owed money to,
Yes,
and you could have easily filed bankruptcy, right, or something like that to avoid all that, or
I did file bankruptcy about a year later. However, the I went to see a lawyer early on when it first happened. I went to see my lawyer and I said, "This is what's happening. This is what's going on. This is how much money was taken out of the business. This is how much cash we had last week. This is how much is gone. Um, all the bank accounts have been stripped. The credit line had been maxed out. Um, I had assumed that the mortgage and stuff was being paid in the last few months. None of that was paid, and I left way too much up to another person. I should have been monitoring everything. And the lawyer that I went to see the first, he said, "Okay, this is what you need to do. This is what they do in business." He said, "Stop paying anyone anything. And you've got like $500,000 in receivables coming in. Get that money as soon as you can and lose it, hide it. Because when you do go bankrupt, you want to not have any assets, and don't worry about the paying people; they'll be fine." And I walked out of that office, and I thought, no, I can't do this. So it wasn't easy, but I was able to do the very best I could with what I had to deal with.
wow, that says a lot about a person.
Well,
Knowing you could get away with something and doing the right thing regardless.
I had an old owner operator friend of mine from the '80s tell me one time that Mark, if you're going to commit fraud or if you're going to steal something, make sure you get enough money to live on the rest of your life. He said, if it's anything less than that, don't do it. And nobody knows how long you're going to live or how much money you're going to need. So that's just kind of a pun that he used all the time.
If you could go back and restructure your business to avoid that, what would be your moves? What would you do differently?
I would have had a better lawyer. I would have had an accountant on retainer, and that's what I did after that in other businesses. Accountant who tracks things and keeps track of the receivables and the payables and that sort of thing on a weekly or monthly basis. I would have had the accounts, the business accounts, the all of the monies that was involved in the business. I would have had a two-signature system. It couldn't be taken out of the account unless two of us signed, or maybe even three of us. I think I would bank with someone else because they allowed all the accounts to be emptied out in 2 days and didn't call me. So I would have done a few things. I would do a few things different. I would pay attention to my business a lot closer, not to the actual brokerage of finding trucks and finding freight, but to the back door business of it.
Do you think, if I heard correctly, you mentioned there was a wife, right?
Yes.
Do you think mixing business and pleasure had anything to do with it as well? Or that's just the cards you were dealt, right? It depends.
Yes, it was. Due to the way things went for us, we were both in the business, and we both got out of working in offices and started our own in our house. It was working really well for us for a lot of years.
And to be clear with the audience, this is the second wife,
And I also had a different dog.
a different dog.
Yeah, than the first wife. I mean, it was the second wife, but the first wife I had a different dog than the one I had with the second wife. But both times
Clean slate.
both times I did end up with the dog.
How nice of them. So this, all these stories, about brokering, trucking, it's been an interesting ride. If you could go back, would you still choose those industries?
Oh, definitely. It was my boyhood dream to be a truck driver. I probably would have stayed if I went back again, I would probably stay as a driver longer than get involved in the offices right away. But
Why is that?
I enjoyed the driving a lot. I really enjoyed trucking. I enjoyed long haul trucking. I enjoyed the lifestyle, and I've gone back to it frequently. I went back to it here the last 10 years or so for some time, and I do enjoy driving. I'm good at it, and I like it.
You get some time to yourself and process all these goals, these thoughts.
Yeah.
Review your life, where you're going.
Oh yes. Well, I think you certainly get a lot more time on your hands with the new laws now because you have to take 10 hours off and not always, but you have to show that you do. So every day at least you got a few hours that you do have to be down.
Overall, do you have any regrets
Regrets?
looking back at anything?
No.
No regrets.
No regrets. You?
I mean, if it's made me what I am, then I guess not. Everything happens for a reason.
Everything happens for a reason, good and bad.
So what would you tell 20-year-old Mark? You're giving him some advice. Like, what would you tell him? Hammer down,
Yeah.
young man.
Yeah, don't smoke.
That's it.
That's it.
Do you still smoke?
Yeah, once in a while.
Yeah.
Not as prolifically as I used to do on the road, but
It creeps up on you.
yeah.
I think trucking and smoking go hand in hand most of the time. You're driving, and it's just that you get, I don't know if it's anxiety or what. You just want to be doing something
Yeah.
to pass the time, stay awake.
Yep. It was a big part of the 70s and 80s, and got a lot of us, but we got to fight it every day.
Nice. Is there anything else you would like to share with the audience?
I just wish anyone in the business, trucking or brokerage, or back office people, or the longshoremen, everybody out here, California. I don't understand your state's laws very well, but I wish you all successes, and I wish you all longevity in what you're doing. And I always tell everybody, make sure you save for a better truck.
All right. I am thankful that you came and took the chance, knowing that I'm new to this podcasting thing, and the audience doesn't know, but we took already like 3 breaks. He's been here since 10:30 a.m. It is now 4 o'clock. And yeah, I appreciate you taking the time once again and being a part of this new thing that we got going on.
Well, Lewis, it's always good to see you, and I'm sure that this, as we iron things out here, and how you iron things out in this system and the like, you're going to bring a lot of help to a lot of people because you have a lot of knowledge.
As do you. Thanks again. Well, that's all, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great one.